Hello and welcome. My name is James Pawelski. I'm Professor of Practice and Director of the Humanities and Human Flourishing Project in the Positive Psychology Center at the University of Pennsylvania. The Humanities and Human Flourishing Project explores connections between the arts, humanities, and well-being. As a part of our project, we brought together groups of scholars across 8 different disciplines in the arts and humanities, including my own discipline of philosophy, to explore connections between these disciplines and the conceptualization and cultivation of well-being. Each of these groups were led by a disciplinary chair who helped us bring together a diverse set of scholars and then edited a volume of essays written by these scholars. I'm delighted to be joined now by Anna Celenza, who is the Thomas E. Caestecker Professor of Music at Georgetown University. Anna, great to have you with us.
Oh, it's always fun to be here. Thanks.
So Anna, I wonder if we could start on a personal note.
Okay.
Could you tell us about a time when your engagement with music advanced your own well-being?
Well, there are countless times. I can think all the way back to being a little kid, but so the most recent one would be about 1.5 years ago. I was on sabbatical, and my career started as a performer, but due to injury, that ended, and I went into scholarship. But I thought, well, I want to go back to performance. And so I went into a completely new field. So I'd started off as a cellist in classical music, and I said, I'm going to take jazz piano. And so for the last 1.5 years, I've been taking jazz piano lessons and playing in ensembles with students and other people, and just that freedom to create something new for the pure joy of it, not to be a professional, not to earn money, just for the joy of being with others and making music. That's been the latest one.
Sounds fascinating and wonderful. Can you tell us about maybe building on that experience and now broadening out to music in general? What is it about engagement in music, do you think, that connects us to human flourishing?
Well, if we talk about music performance, there are a lot of ways. So as performers, those of us who are making music, and that can be anything from beating a rhythm on a drum to singing in church to shouting out a fight song at a football game. There are a lot of ways where we make music as a way of being part of a community. When we sing with others, when we play with others, or even when we're in the audience and we feel the energy from the audience when someone's performing and it really inspires us. So I think that community connection is one really important way. On the other side of it, there are people who compose music, who write music. And as a jazz musician, you're also kind of composing as you improvise. And there's something about creating a new melody or a new harmony or listening to the person next to you play a rhythmic pattern and then incorporating it into your own performance. It's sort of like a conversation. And I would say one of the most empowering and one of the strongest elements that help us flourish in music is it helps us listen in a new way. We're not just hearing the sounds. We're listening. We're looking for meaning. We're looking for a connection. And that's the most exciting thing. That's when the flourishing and the community and that sense of, I feel great, I feel joy, that's when it happens.
So can you tell us about what has happened with technological advancements with music, where, 100 years ago or maybe less than that, the only way we would have heard music is if we were at a concert or if we ourselves were creating it. Whereas now we can listen to music anytime we want to, it's streaming and so forth. How does that connect to this idea of human flourishing?
Well, music used to be purely a service. And by that I mean if you were a musician and someone wanted to hear music, they would need to hire you and you would need to provide that. So before we had recorded sound, which started around the turn of the 20th century, making music, listening to music automatically meant one of two things. Either you were directly engaging with another person. So, for example, if I didn't know how to play music, but I wanted to hear it, I would need to hire you to perform for me. Or you would be deeply involved in the music-making process yourself. So if I did know how to play the piano, I would play it for myself. With recorded sound, suddenly that personal connection disappears. Or can disappear. The other thing that is no longer required is that you know how to create the music yourself. And so recorded sound let us experience music in a much more private way. Suddenly, you could hear a piece of music in the same way you might read a novel, meaning in complete isolation by yourself in your own thoughts. And I think that has opened music up to many more people. So technology is good in that way. It also means we can hear the exact same performance more than one time, and that was impossible. So before recorded sound, the only way we could talk about music was as a memory. It was something that had happened, and the only way it existed was in our memory. Now we can refer to the recording and listen to it over and over again. So technology has changed things in that way. Over the 20th century and now into the 21st century, it's changing all the more. And those changes are about making it more accessible. So when I was in college, we had CDs, and it was, you'd have this Walkman, and you could put your CD in and walk anywhere with your music, which seemed remarkable. Today, you can just stream it on your phone. So you can have access to all the music in the world, basically, on this little device, your phone, and you put your earbuds in. What that has changed from, say, when I was in college is that people really tend to listen alone now, as opposed to that idea of you take the CD out of the jewel case and you put it in the machine, and oftentimes it's with a friend and you listen and you talk about the music. That conversation now is happening through social media, online. So it's not that people aren't communicating and talking about it, it's that this other sort of virtual world has been created, and there's exposure to lots more music. And so what I've found, for example, with my students at Georgetown University, they listen to a much broader range of music than I ever did, because it's accessible. And the goal is not to be listening to the latest new hit. The goal is, for many of the students, to find that music nobody else knows. So everyone is becoming a curator, wanting to find something new that no one else knows that they can share. And I think that's an exciting shift that has happened with social media and also with streaming.
Do you think that in order to experience the well-being of music, it's just sufficient to have music available? Or do you think there are other aspects of it that help us to connect more deeply to the well-being potential of music?
Well, the situation I just brought up has been wonderful for listeners, but it's been worse for performers. So before streaming, performers could really make a living in the recording studio. They were paid well for their recordings. With streaming, not so much. So that option has disappeared. It has been more difficult for musicians to flourish as studio musicians. And I think instead of saying that technology is bad and it's horrible for musicians and it's getting in the way of flourishing, I think the better way to think about it is, if we are going to be resilient as musicians, as audience members, as composers, you're not going to do away with the technology, but there are ways to think about, is there a new way I can connect with people? And so what we're seeing is a lot of musicians now are going back to live music. And a lot of my students, for example, they're streaming all this music and being exposed to all this music, but they also are noticing that they're missing a connection. And so it's true, they're maybe spending $5 a month to stream music, whereas I used to drop $20 on a CD, so I spent much more. But they are spending much more money on live music. They're going to festivals, they're going to concerts, and so I think there's a shift that happens. So musicians who are going to flourish now, it's part of the kind of old school flourishing of making that connection with audience members, sometimes through social media, but a lot of times one-on-one or in a sort of more intimate space of performing.
So one of the things that has come up in our discussions of the arts and well-being in particular, this notion of performance and how the performers themselves may experience things differently at times from the audience members. And there's a kind of hard work, a kind of labor, maybe an emotional labor that the performers take on to provide an experience for the audience. Can you say something about, so you mentioned the financial difficulties. Are there other kinds of constraints that are important to recognize when we think about the well-being of the performers themselves?
In this age of social media and technology, the performer has had to take on many more roles. It used to be you could write your songs or write your symphonies and perform your music, and that was your job as a musician. And the record label took care of the rest. Record labels are not covering most musicians now. As much as the internet has given musicians the ability to share their music with anyone through things like SoundCloud and YouTube and Spotify, it also means that they can't just, for people to find it, you can't just throw it up there. You really have to think about, how am I going to engage with audiences? How am I going to kind of get my brand out there? How can I get, a certain company to pick up my tune for their advertisement, because licensing helps me make a lot of money. And so that has led to less flourishing for a lot of musicians. So I'll just lay that out there. So part of it is, you can't, there are some people who feel very comfortable doing those things, and there's some that don't. So I think human flourishing, it's not a one-size-fits-all. It really is about letting the musicians and even, audience members think about, well, where do I flourish? Am I comfortable with lots of people in a closed space, or would I rather listen to the music alone? Am I comfortable kind of telling all my inner secrets on social media to my fans because that way they feel connected to me, or am I going to protect myself? And I think this is something that artists and listeners really need to think about before they sort of embark on that road.
Really fascinating thoughts. And I want to ask you about flourishing. And so you were talking about music having, we have greater accessibility to music now. What about flourishing? Is flourishing the kind of thing that is only important or only interesting to people of privilege? So you have a certain socioeconomic status, you are well respected in your community, you have a certain kind of family background, then you're concerned with flourishing? Or is flourishing something that has broader relevance than that?
Well, flourishing, especially when it comes to music, there is no socioeconomic divide. I mean, I think music finds its way into all societies, all levels. You can be trained or not trained. Singing happy birthday when it's someone's birthday can really lead to flourishing. That's a happy moment, a happy song.
So Anna, you're a scholar and an instructor. You're a teacher, and so you teach students about music. Are there ways of approaching music in the classroom to help students flourish through that study?
Oh, yeah, I think there are lots of ways. For example, one of the first things I do first day of class is I ask everyone to take out their smartphone and pull up the last 3 things you listen to and share it with your neighbor. And that is the best break the ice. And normally it's music that maybe they were discovering something. So instantly students either find that they have a connection. Oh, I love that piece too, or I was listening to that too, or I don't know anything about this artist. Can you tell me about it? So I think even sharing music is a great way to build community and to get to know each other. I think our music choices oftentimes are an aspect of our identity. We identify with the music that we listen to. I have a lot of students who say they put music on in their earbuds, and as they walk across campus, it's like their own private movie score as they go through life. And so I think being able to share that is a great icebreaker.
So my final question for you is about the future.
Yeah.
So as you think about the work that you have done as the disciplinary chair for the music group, the work of the other scholars, the volume that you've put together, what is your hope that this work might do in helping to perhaps shift things with regard to music and human flourishing?
One thing would be to take music more seriously. Even in my own university, in academia, there will be faculty outside the music program, and they just think we just sit around and play music all day, and that it's all fun and games. So that would be one, to understand that yes, that it's music as a practice, as a fine art, but it also is a humanities discipline where we think kind of deep thoughts about what do our choices mean about us, and what are the positive and negative effects of music, and sort of being more conscious about that. The other thing that I would hope is that it will just draw more attention to the importance of the arts, and not just music, but visual arts and writing, as a way for us to sometimes explore worlds or to explore things in life that are not as easy in just words alone. One of the hardest things to do is to write about music. Many people say music expresses itself, and I think that's really true. So I would hope that people would listen more. I think we're very good at hearing lots of music. I don't know that people have really stopped to listen to it anymore. But as it's gotten so easy, we've put it in the background. It's, when we eat, when we go to the mall, when we're in our car, like music is always sort of that background noise. And I think that we love to have it there, but we aren't focusing on it. We're not giving it the attention it deserves. So I hope people would stop and just listen.
Well, thank you very much, Anna, for being with us and talking about music and well-being. Thank you for the work that you have done as the disciplinary chair for the music group.
Thank you.
And thank you for having joined us as we had this conversation with Anna Celenza, exploring connections between music and well-being. And we invite you to join us again as we continue these discussions, looking at these rich connections between the arts, humanities, and well-being.